My mother-in-law set 6 plates. There were 7 of us. She looked at my son, decided he wasn't one of the 6, and pointed him toward a folding table by the front door, the one she uses for boots and umbrellas. Cozier for him there, she said. By dessert, she'd be the one who couldn't look anyone in the eye. But what actually broke that room wasn't anything my husband said. It was the folder I set down first. This house is for real family, Diane told me, smiling like she'd done me a favor. She had no idea what was sitting in my bag. Welcome back to Obsidian Justice. I'm Rachel. I'm 35. I do the books for a small contracting company, and for 4 years I kept this family's piece running like one of my ledgers, quietly, invisibly, on my own dime. Not anymore. Drop a comment and subscribe before we start. You'll want to be here for the ending. My husband Mark runs a machine shop. Steady, quiet, thinks before he talks. We married 2.5 years ago, when my son Eli was 5. Mark's 2 kids from his first marriage, Derek, 14, and Sophie, 11, stay with us every other weekend. I loved that we became a full house overnight. What I didn't love was that Mark's mother never treated it like one. She treated it like a house with 2 kinds of children in it. I kept that family running. I remembered the allergies, the permission slips. And when Mark's father's health started slipping, the request always went to Mark, but the money, quietly, came from me. I'm not saying this to be a martyr. I'm a bookkeeper. Tracking what goes out is just how my brain settles. Nobody had done the math on what that meant. Diane had a way of saying Eli's name that put a little fence around it. Derek and Sophie got the Hargrove jaw, the Hargrove work ethic. Eli got told to wipe his feet. There's a corkboard in her kitchen covered in photos of the other 2. Not one of Eli, though he brought her a new drawing every visit. I found them later, flattened in the recycling. Frank's heart medication ran nearly $450 a month his pension couldn't cover. Then the basement flooded, almost $5,000 to fix. So the help started the way it always does, one transfer I told myself was temporary. Then it became monthly. Mark knew where the money came from. Diane assumed it was Mark's. I never corrected her. Correcting her meant a conversation, and conversations in that family always came with a bill attached. So I logged every payment, the way I log everything, because numbers don't change their story depending on who's in the room. I'd drawn the line before. Told Diane plainly that Eli was my son and her grandson. She folded her hands, said she loved all the grandkids equally, then asked for Frank's pharmacy receipts. I told Mark once I was done funding a house where my son got a peppermint while the others got $20 bills. I had the banking app open, thumb over the transfer, the same week Frank landed in the ER. You can't cut off a man's heart medication to win an argument with his wife. So I closed the app. Mark asked for more time. He always asked for more time. Wonderful man. Terrible timing. But I kept one sentence for myself, on the drive home, while Eli slept in his booster seat. Love isn't inherited. It's shown up for. I'd showed up for 4 years, in dollars and silence. The silence was about to end. Here's what Diane didn't know. That winter, Mark sat on the edge of Eli's bed one night, watched him sleep a long while, then found me in the kitchen and said he wanted to make it official, not stepdad. Father. On paper. In court. We hired an attorney. Eli's biological father had signed away his rights years before I met Mark, so it moved clean. 6 weeks before Mark's birthday, we drove to the courthouse in our good clothes. The judge asked Mark if he understood that adoption made Eli his son in every legal sense, his heir, no different from Derek or Sophie. Mark said yes before she finished the sentence. Eli got to bang the little gavel. His name is Eli Hargrove now. We were saving the announcement for Mark's birthday dinner. Diane insisted on hosting that year. Mark's sister Carol, divorced, moved back in with their parents, self-appointed keeper of the family china and the family hierarchy, handled the details. I offered to help. Carol said, brightly, that they wanted to keep it family this year. I ordered the cake anyway, with all 7 names piped across the top, and thought, a good number. A full number. On the phone, Carol asked if we'd need a kids' table, then answered herself, probably not necessary. The kids can figure it out. I should have heard the shape of that sentence. We drove out on a gray Saturday, Eli holding a rolled-up drawing on his lap, a surprise for Dad, no peeking. Diane met us with a hug for Mark, a nod for Derek and Sophie, and a there he is for Eli that never reached her eyes. I set the cake down and counted chairs. 6. I counted again. I'm a bookkeeper, the first count is never the one I trust. 6. Carol wouldn't meet my eyes. Tight on space this year. Eli stood in the doorway, doing the same math I was, and moved closer to my side. The neighbors stopped by with a birthday card. Diane put a hand on Derek's shoulder, one on Sophie's, presented them like trophies. These are the grandchildren. Eli stood a few feet back holding his drawing, waiting to be introduced. He wasn't. The neighbors left without ever learning his name. He tugged my sleeve. Mom, am I really part of this family? I knelt right there and told him yes. He nodded the way kids do when they want to believe you and can't quite manage it. Behind me, in the kitchen, Carol murmured something about keeping the seating simple. And Diane said the sentence that became the spine of the whole night. This house is for real family. Eli heard it. Watched it land. Filed it away next to the corkboard and the peppermints. He didn't cry. He just went very still, exactly the way I go still. I understood, for the first time, exactly whose son he was. Mark missed all of it, out back with the neighbors. I made a calculation, the kind I make all day with other people's money. I weighed waiting against erupting, and chose to wait a little longer. But I kept my bag close. Inside it, the manila envelope, and beside it, a second folder I'd printed at midnight, telling myself it was for tax season. You don't pack your ledgers for a birthday dinner unless part of you already knows the dinner is about to become an audit. Dinner was called. While Diane carried out the roast, Carol suggested Eli might be more comfortable at a little folding table by the door. I told her he was fine right here. She lowered her voice. After dinner, they were doing family photos, just the grandkids. Then, catching herself too late, the real grandkids. This wasn't improvised. The chairs, the folding table, the photos, decided before we walked in. Diane appeared with the carving knife, saw Eli standing exactly where he belonged, and decided that wouldn't do. Eli, honey, come sit at your special table. Frank saw it coming. Diane. He's just a boy. Let him sit with us. The most he'd said on the subject in 4 years. Diane didn't even look at him. I'm handling the table, Frank. And he stayed out of it. He'd known where the money for his medication came from the whole time, and still, when his wife told him to sit down, he sat down. Before Diane could steer him off, Eli crossed to Mark, who'd just walked in, and unrolled his drawing. 5 figures holding hands, Dad, Mom, me, Derek, Sophie, in front of our house, everyone grinning, even Derek, who hadn't smiled in a family photo since he turned 12. Mark knelt to be level with him. This is the best present I've ever gotten. He meant it. Diane glanced at it. That's a nice drawing, sweetheart, the voice you'd use for a stranger's kid handing you a dandelion. Then, briskly, dinner's getting cold. Mark tucked the drawing under his arm, forgot he was holding it. Eli needed the bathroom. While he washed his hands, my bag tipped and the envelope slid out onto the tile, face up. The decree. County seal. Judge's signature. In the matter of the adoption of a minor child, Eli Hargrove. Petitioning parent, Mark Hargrove. I smoothed it flat and read it again, slower. I made myself a promise right there. If Diane put her hands on my son tonight, this paper was going on her table, face up, in front of everyone. Not as a weapon. As a fact. Dinner was called again. Carol steered Eli toward the folding table. Mark's back was turned, carrying out the cake. I crossed the room, but Diane intercepted first, her hand over Carol's on Eli's shoulder. "The real children will sit at the real table," she said, pleasant, for the whole room to hear. "Eli can eat here. It's less overwhelming for him." The table went silent. I heard my own voice come out level. "He's staying at this table. And I already know why you're saying he isn't." Diane's pleasantness hardened. "Let the real children sit with their father tonight. It's his birthday." Her hand stayed on his shoulder. "There's no shame in it. He's just not really ours. Everyone here knows it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise at my own table." There it was, out loud, in front of everyone. Eli stood frozen. Diane, sensing the room wobble, reached for her anchor. "This house is for real family. 3 times now. I didn't plan what happened next. I just knew the years of letting it go were finished." Diane, misreading my stillness, turned Eli toward the door and pushed him, not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to say, "You're a thing I can move." He stumbled, caught the doorframe. The drawing slipped from under Mark's arm and hit the floor, 5 figures holding hands, face up. Nobody spoke. Sophie's eyes filled. Derek's chair scraped back. Eli looked at the drawing, then up at me. I crossed the room. I picked the drawing up first, smoothed it flat, set Eli behind me, hand flat on his back, steady, present, and stood between him and his grandmother. I didn't shout. I looked Diane in the eye and said it slow enough for every word to land. "Don't you ever put your hands on my son again." Mark walked in, saw it all in one beat too late, his son's wet eyes, the drawing on the floor, his mother's arm still raised. He set the cake down very carefully, hands shaking. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," Diane said. "I asked Eli to eat somewhere comfortable and Rachel made a production of it." Derek's voice cracked across the room. "Grandma pushed him. A 14-year-old will tell the truth in a room full of adults who've agreed to shade it." Mark looked at his son, his daughter, the drawing, the best present he'd ever gotten, now creased. He walked over, stood beside me. "Tell me exactly what my mother just did." Diane dug in instead of stopping. "That boy is not yours. You took on Rachel's son, fine, but don't ask the rest of us to rewrite the bloodline. Derek and Sophie are Hargroves. I won't watch you hand this land to a stranger's kid playing dress-up at my table." "I did decide," Mark said. Quiet. Cold, like me. Frank finally looked up, gray-faced. He knew what was coming. I looked at Eli, his stubborn Hargrove chin, official 6 weeks ago whether Diane liked it or not, then at Mark. He gave me the smallest nod. I reached into my bag. Took out the manila envelope first. Walked it to the table, to the empty space where Eli's chair should have been. "Diane. For 4 years I've watched you decide who counts. I'm done keeping the peace. Love isn't inherited. It's shown up for. Let me show you who's been showing up." I slid the decree out, face up. "That's a court order. 6 weeks ago, Mark adopted Eli. It's done. His name is Eli Hargrove. By law, he's Mark's son, not stepson. Same as Derek. Same as Sophie. Which makes him your grandson, and Mark's heir. Equally. Same claim to whatever's left of this land you were just promising the others." Diane's hand went to the table's edge. "You can't." "We did," I said. "A judge signed it. There's no one left to argue with." Derek grinned despite himself. "So Eli's really our brother? Officially?" "He was always your brother," Mark said. "Now the law agrees." Sophie took Eli's hand. "That's only the first paper," I said. I laid the folder beside the decree, open to the totals. "You said this house is for real family. Let's talk about who's actually been feeding it." I touched each line, the medication, the basement, then the total underlined twice. "Just under $31,000, Diane." Over 4 years. Not 1 cent from Mark's wages. From me. From the stranger's kid's mother. I've been keeping this house warm the whole time you've been deciding my son doesn't belong in it. Frank finally said it. Diane. It's true. All of it. He'd known the whole time. Diane got loud instead of quiet, the only thing left when an argument collapses. How dare you bring money into this, into my own house, on her feet now, red to the hairline. Get that off my table. I decide who sits at it. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not raising my voice, Diane. I don't need to. The numbers already did. I didn't bring money into this, you did, the day you decided some children eat at the table and some eat by the door. I just wrote down what it cost. Silence. The kind that lands on a woman who's controlled a room her whole life and just lost it in front of everyone she's controlled. Mark said Eli's drawing on the table between the 2 papers, smoothed it flat. You pushed my son toward the door. My son. I swore in a courtroom 6 weeks ago to be his father for the rest of my life. So here's what happens now. We're walking out together. All 5 of us, the family in this drawing. And the check stopped tonight. You don't get to live off this family and spit on half of it in the same breath. Diane went white. Frank covered his eyes. Carol sat down hard, the inheritance she'd been guarding all night suddenly revealed as a house her sister-in-law had been keeping afloat the whole time. Diane reached one hand toward her son. For the first time in his life, he didn't take it. Happy birthday to me, he said. I'm spending it with my family. He lifted Eli onto his hip. Derek stood up from the table he'd been told his whole life was his by right. He's my brother. If he can't sit here, I don't want to either. He took Eli's other hand. Sophie followed without a word. Just like that, the 2 real grandchildren voted with their feet and chose the stranger's kid. We walked out the same door Diane had tried to push Eli through, all 5 of us, together, on our own feet. Behind us, nobody spoke. Diane stood at the head of her perfect table with her 6-place settings, watching the family she'd spent 4 years sorting into real and not real walk out as one unsorted whole. In the car, Eli finally spoke. Did I do something wrong? Mark answered before I could. No, buddy. You did everything right, just by being you. The transfer stopped that week. I set up something new, a direct line to Frank's pharmacy, nothing that passes through Diane's hands. One condition, in writing, the day she calls Eli her grandson and means it, we'll talk about the rest. Frank called once, alone, and apologized in a cracked voice. Diane hasn't called. Carol hasn't either. That's their loss to live with now. Our hallway is still covered in Eli's drawings. Last week he taped up a new one, 5 figures holding hands, and signed it himself. Eli Hargrove. Blood decides who you're related to. Showing up decides who your family is. And I've learned to keep very good records of exactly who shows up. If someone in your life keeps score of who's real, show them who actually shows up instead. Comment who shows up below, and subscribe to Obsidian Justice. We'll keep the door open. We'll keep the books. We'll see you next time.